Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are on this planet. And welcome to the very first session of our new Data to Demand to Action webinar series. I'm Christa Hasenkopf. I'm the director of EPIC's Clean Air program, and I'm so glad you're here to help us kick this off today. So EPIC's Clean Air program is working to bring actionable information about the quality of the air we breathe and its impacts on our health to every corner of the globe in order to motivate action and lay guideposts for efficient air pollution policies. This work includes the EPIC Air Quality Fund, which supports local actors in generating reliable long-term air pollution data to drive national level impacts in the places of the world, especially where it's needed most. And it also includes the Air Quality Life Index, or AQLI, which uses air pollution data to translate the impact of pollution on a person's life expectancy. You'll hear more about that in a bit. At the EPIC Clean Air program, we believe that air pollution is solvable and requires effective policies. Effective policies require a demand for change. And to demand change, citizens need to understand the scope of the problem, which in turn needs data and effective communication. So to help us better understand the relationship between data and creating change, we are launching this new webinar series where we spotlight case studies from around the world on how air quality data has been used to demand and catalyze clean air action. And I want to call out, we know the relationship between data and meaningful change is not simple. For one, we know that while air quality data is more available than ever across the world, that doesn't mean there's more action. So accessibility and data literacy continues to be a challenge. And even where data exists or is even plentiful and it's understood, questions remain around how citizens can use that data most effectively for triggering policy action. How do you communicate data so people really care about air pollution in the first place? So that's what we want to explore with you in this webinar series. And with that, I'll hand it over to Tanushree Ganguly, EPIC's Air Quality Life Index Director, to introduce our first guest and the geographical focus for this webinar in our series.
Super. Thanks so much, Christa, for setting the context. With that, I'm going to quickly share my screen. And if you can please confirm that my screen is visible, that would be great. Is my screen visible and am I audible? All right, great. So hello, everyone. And like Christa said, thank you very, very much for joining us today. Before I go ahead and introduce a speaker for the day, what I'm going to do is I'm going to further try and elaborate the context in which we are organizing this conversation. I'm not going to call it a webinar. This is going to be a conversation where we are indulging our own intellectual curiosity in unpacking the connection between access to air quality data and actual change on ground. Some of you who followed Air Quality Life Index work might know that the idea behind the Air Quality Life Index is to make air quality information more accessible and unlock demand for clean air policies across the world. Now, in order to do that, what we do is we disseminate information on air quality and its impacts on human life expectancy around 250 countries around the world. In addition to that, we also produce an annual report, which provides a snapshot of global trends in pollution levels in different world regions. We also sometimes do these specific fact sheets that spotlight specific countries which are particularly ill by bad pollution levels. Now, over the last couple of years, one of the questions that we've been trying to unpack is that in countries or in regions where we've seen a reduction in pollution levels, what role has data and citizen demand for clean air really played in bringing about this change? And this question brings us to the European region, and in particular, the EU countries, where we've seen, about a 30% reduction in particulate concentrations since 1998. Now, mind you, despite this reduction, there are countries like Poland, Italy, Bulgaria, Bosnia and Herzegovina, where people can still lose about a year of their life as a result of breathing polluted air. Now, in Poland, in the city of Krakow, where our speaker comes from, an average resident can lose about 1.7 years of their life. Let's take a minute to sort of internalize that data. 1.7 years of their life as a result of breathing polluted air. But things get interesting here. Between 1998 and 2022, which is the last year for which we have data out there, pollution levels in the city of Krakow have gone down by over 40%. And as you can see from this graph, the reduction is most evident and most pronounced since 2010. So it's clear something happened in 2010 which accelerated efforts towards reducing pollution in this city. Now, I believe that sort of sets the scene for us to invite our guest speaker for the day and, sort of our co-panelist and discussant to talk us through what really happened in Krakow and what brought about this massive reduction. And with that little introduction, over to you, Anna, to tell us the story of what brought about change in Krakow.
Thank you very much, Tanushree, for this introduction and for inviting me to this very interesting, I hope interesting panel. Yeah, I will try to share my presentation. Yes, can you see it?
Yes, confirming that.
Okay, good. So in the next 10 minutes, I will try to briefly tell a story of Krakow's fight for clean air, but not only Krakow's, but actually I will refer to the whole country of Poland. And now I cannot, I don't know why, usually, oh yeah. We started our campaign here in Krakow, which is a beautiful, beautiful Renaissance and Baroque city in southern Poland. So if you have any chance of visiting it, please do. And we started our campaign over 10 years ago in 2012. At that time, most of us were young parents of young children, small children. And that was our main motivation. When we got to know that Krakow was actually very heavily polluted, we decided to do something about it because of the health of our children. So over a decade ago, Krakow was one of the most polluted cities in the EU. And actually for 4 months in a year, so 1/3 of the year, we would experience very, very high concentrations of particulates matter. So, and to make the matters worse, these 4 months actually happened in a row, I would say, because this was the bad air quality was concentrated over the heating season, because the main reason for Krakow's air pollution was the burning of coal and wood in household heating installations. In Poland, we have quite fierce winters, although due to climate change, less and less so, but still we do need a lot of heating during the heating season. And but the thing is that actually no one knew, well, very few people, or maybe even really no one knew that the situation was so serious in Krakow, because there was no data. Well, data was collected by the environmental inspection, but it was published in a very well hidden website in a very strange looking table. You would have to have expert knowledge in order to be able to interpret this data. So when we started our campaign, this is what we started doing. We started talking in a simple way, explaining to people the data about air quality and telling them whether this day they can go out, or whether the air pollution is so bad that they should, for example, refrain from going out if they have such an opportunity. And when people got to know that they actually live in one of the most polluted cities in the EU, but they don't know about it, and no one informs them about it, and no one does anything about it, they got really angry. And here you can see the result of that. This is one of our protest marches organized in Krakow, where people really took to the streets to show how angry they are and that they are expecting authorities to do something about this very high air pollution. And we also, in our campaign in Krakow, we had this, you could say, simple but also quite complicated demand that we have to ban coal and wood heating from the city. We also demanded that the authorities help people financially to replace their coal boilers with clean heating, and also that there is a special financial scheme helping the less affluent households to actually cover the costs of heating, because at that time coal was the cheapest source of heating. And much to our surprise, well, maybe not to our surprise, but we were joined by, thousands of people. We were joined by scientists. We were joined by the medical community. The media got really, really interested in the subject. Like the air quality in Krakow was the subject to talk about at that time. And also international media started taking interest in Krakow because Krakow is a very beautiful, very touristic place as well. So, New York Times would talk about it, Al Jazeera would talk about it, which also put pressure on the authorities to do something about it. And to our surprise, after only 1 year of the campaign, regional authorities decided to vote for the ban on coal and then later on wood heating in Krakow. And of course, the ban was implemented over the next years because people had to have time to replace their heating installation. I will talk about the results at the end of my presentation. But of course, Krakow was just one city in Poland with this problem. And actually, the whole country has a massive problem with air pollution. Benzoyl levels in Poland are the highest in the EU. Particulate matter, PM10, PM2.5 concentration levels are also very high, the highest or second highest. And soon we were contacted by many people from different locations all over Poland who have heard about Krakow, about its struggle to fight the air pollution, that they also have the same problem, that they also live in a very polluted air and they want to do something about it. So this is why we decided to establish a national level NGO, Polish Smog Alert, and which unites local grassroots fighting for clean air. What we do in Polish Smog Alert is that we help the local fight for clean air, but as a group, we also fight for national level changes. When we look at Poland, the main culprit, the main reason for this massive air pollution is the same as in Krakow, that is burning of coal and wood in household heating installations. These are old, inefficient coal and wood boilers. You can also burn them trash, and some people do it. And we call these boilers smokers because they emit a lot of smoke and, of course, a lot of air pollution. Around still 50% of single family buildings in Poland are heated with coal and wood, but mainly coal. So this is really a lot. So we together as Polish Smog Alert, we started fighting for a number of national level changes, legislative, financial, administrative. I will just go through the most important ones. So at the beginning, we advocated for the ban of selling smokers these inefficient, very polluting boilers. Because each year 150,000 of such smokers were sold to Polish households, which meant that they would stay there for 10 years, 20 years. So it really petrified further the problem. And of course, they were very cheap and very popular. So a lot of them would go to Polish households. Again, everything could be also sold as coal. There were no coal standards. So you could sell very polluted coal with a lot of ash content, humidity content, sulfur content. This type of coal was very cheap, also very popular. So you would buy cheap coal to a cheap boiler and you would have very cheap heating. But in reality, it was very expensive because it cost pollution. And as we know, pollution costs lives and costs money. So we started advocating for the introduction of coal standards, and they were introduced, and a couple of years they're being made more and more stringent. Another important thing are so-called anti-smog resolutions that are introduced on the regional level. So here you can see a map of Poland, and Poland has 16 regions. 14 of these regions have anti-smog resolutions. So these resolutions ban the use, not only the sales, but also the use of these smokers, so the most polluting boilers. As you can see, the dates show when the use of the smokers became illegal in each region. In most of the regions, it has already happened, but unfortunately, this is only something that is written on paper. And enforcement of this legislation is much trickier, and still a lot of illegal smokers are being used all over Poland. So this is what we are still working on. And last but not least, we have also advocated for a subsidy program to help all the people who have smokers to install cleaner heating, to invest in thermal renovation so that they can reduce their heat demand and they can have cheaper and more affordable heating. And this program has been in operation since 2018, and the aim is to help 3 million single family houses. Around 1 million houses have already been covered with subsidies, and we're still working on the next 2 million houses. Of course, in larger cities, we are also dealing with pollution from traffic. So we're trying to introduce low emission zones in order to limit the traffic of the most polluting cars, that is older diesel cars. So these are all the let's say main legislative or financial changes that we have been working on. But of course, as a campaign and advocacy organization, we also do some more exciting things, that is things connected with campaigning as such. And this is an example of one of our campaigns. We call it See What You Breathe campaign, or the lung campaign. So within that campaign, we have huge installations like 2 meters by 3 meters. So it's a big billboard, which is portable, and it contains artificial lungs covered with white fabric. Beneath those lungs, we have ventilators that suck the air through the fabric. And we go to certain locations with that installation, and we leave it there for 2 weeks or 1 month. And usually after a couple of days, or let's say 2 weeks, the fabric turns from white to sometimes gray, sometimes black, showing what is invisible, that is air pollution. And the campaign attracts a lot of media attention. Every year we have over 1,000 of media materials, starting from main TV news through local news portals. And we reach really millions of people with a message that air pollution is still a problem in Poland, and it kills 40,000 people a year, which is really a lot. So coming back to Krakow. As I said, we banned the use of coal and wood. We eliminated over the decade over 30,000 coal and wood boilers from the city. And did it improve the air quality? Fortunately, yes. The ban became operational in the fall of 2019. And when we look at the data from 2012, until 2023, we can see a dramatic air quality improvement. This graph shows the days with daily particulate matter 10 concentration over 50 micrograms per cubic meter. So this is the limit value in the European legislation, that this pollution should not exceed this value. So in 2012, depending on the station, here we have 3 official measurement stations active in Krakow, we would have around 120 days of such days with exceedances of PM10. 10 years later, it's around 20. So we have gained every year 100 days of air quality that stays within the EU norm, which is great, but it also translates into health impacts and health improvement. A recent study has shown that the incidence of asthma symptoms among children in Krakow fell over that decade from 22%, which is really a lot. 1/4 of school children in Krakow would suffer from asthma symptoms, to 9%, so which is great to show that air quality improvement translates into health improvement. But I was talking about the whole country, and we can also see this air quality improvement not only in Krakow itself, but also Poland. Here we have 2 maps. These are concentrations of PM10 as well. In 2012, we could see all the areas in red and striped red, they would have problems with keeping to the EU limits for PM10. In 2023, 10 years later, we can see that only 2 regions still do not comply with the EU limits. We know that the EU limits will become more stringent in 2030, and we still have to do a lot to comply with the new norms, but we can see that the path which Poland has taken is an effective path that will allow for reaching these limits. So that's it from me. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Anna. And I think that was a super clear presentation, honestly. And it's difficult to ask any follow-up questions when the presentation itself is so self-explanatory, but I'm still going to try. So for people who've joined us, the idea is for the next 20 minutes or so, there are a few questions that I have that I would like to ask Anna. But what we'd also like to encourage is for the attendees to use the Q&A box very actively and put in any questions that you have, which I'm sure you do for Anna. And we would like to answer them live as the conversation progresses. I already see that there are a couple of questions in the Q&A box, which I'm going to use as I sort of have this conversation with Anna. But once again, attendees, you're more than welcome to put in your questions, and we'll ensure that we try and answer them as well as we can. All right. So I think, Anna, one thing that sort of struck me, I mean, we've started this conversation by saying that data translates into demand, and then demand translates into action. But what we heard from you is that when you started this campaign, in 2012, there was data, but it wasn't particularly accessible, or it was available in a very obscure way. But sort of you made this attempt to make the data more, user-friendly, and sort of brought it to, people who could easily understand the messaging around the data. So can you talk a little bit about that, what format was it on, how much data was really available, and then what did you do to make it more accessible and relatable to people?
Yeah, that's a very interesting and I think important issue, because without data, it's very difficult to say whether, it's air pollution, maybe just a bad smell, basically. Because that's what people thought, that, okay, it's winter, it just smells bad. Oh, this fog is pretty romantic, or, things like that. But actually, it was very heavy air pollution. So yeah, when we started our campaign, there were only 3 official measurement stations. There were no cheap, low-cost PM sensors. So, but the data from these 3 measurement stations, and Krakow is a city of 1 million people, so 3 measurement stations is really not many. So the data from these 3 measurement stations was presented in like one of the sub sites on the website of environmental inspection. And you would have to know, first of all, that this data is gathered by environmental inspection. Then you would have to click through, like, I don't know, maybe 10 times through different sub websites, sub pages. And then you would arrive at a very complicated looking table with strange numbers, but you would have no idea how to interpret it. It's 100 a lot or not, right? So you have to have this knowledge. So what we started doing was we established a Facebook fan page. At that time, Facebook was the most, popular social medium in Poland. And we started just publishing in very simple information for people that today the concentrations are very high. So here is the concentration for this and this hour. The daily norm is this. So if you can, do not go out. Definitely do not go jogging. Do not go for a walk with your child. Do not open the windows and stuff like that. So and it was really, really eye-opening for the people. So we really used social media and very simple language we just started simply with showing the data that was hidden. There was no apps for mobile phones. They soon became available, but at the time when we started, nothing like that. And also, if I may prolong my answer a bit, we had very limited network of official measurements. So what was really great that I think it was in 2015 or maybe 16 that there were initiatives appearing providing low-cost sensors and also very nice visual access to the data. One of the, I think, maybe the best examples in Poland is the company which is called AQLI. They cooperate with municipalities. Right now, I think they have like 2,000 measurement stations around Poland. They were the first to do it like on a massive scale. And also to, to provide measurements in the places where there would never be measurements, like in the countryside, in smaller towns. And that was for us very, very helpful because there was like a belief that air quality is bad only in large cities and that villages and smaller towns, they have this fresh air connected with the countryside. But actually in Poland, it's the other way around. The worst air quality is in smaller towns and also in villages because they have a very large concentrations of these smokers, that is those really polluted boilers. So yeah.
Great. So I think the two messages that I'm getting out of here is one, sort of bringing the data to a platform which people use extensively. It could be social media, or it could just be, a phone app, because, people are very used to sort of using their phone for different kinds of information. And the other interesting piece that you've mentioned is breaking misconceptions in sort of the kind of messaging that you put out. So sort of trying to find evidence, sort of not deliberately pursuing it, but sort of when misconceptions get eliminated in terms of which places are thought to be clean, but they're not necessarily clean, that also kinds of build engagement around the data. Now, that's an extreme.
Yeah, but
yes.
If I may add, I think what is also important is that you really simplify your message, because people are not interested in micrograms per cubic meter. They're interested if the air is safe or not safe.
Perfect.
And that's one thing. So this color system, for example, works really well, so that they don't even have to look at the numbers. They just look at the colors. Green is good, orange is average, red is bad, right? But also to translate this data into something meaningful. So for example, what you are doing when you're translating into the years or months of life lost, this is a very powerful message. What we have also done with this pollution, which is called benzoypyran, it's a very complicated name. No one knows what it is. And this is a carcinogenic substance, right? So, and also found in cigarette smoke. So what we did, we translated it into the number of cigarettes that you kind of smoke once you breathe. And it turned out, so the amount of benzoypyran in the cigarettes, right? And it turned out, for example, that in Krakow, it was 2,000 cigarettes a year, regardless of whether you're a child, a pregnant woman, an older person, and so on. So that I remember that this also was like, well, it made a huge impression on people. So it's also about clever usage of the data, I think.
No, I think that's excellent. So I'm sort of trying to also put together a mantra for, making the data communication more effective as you were speaking. So I think 4 things that I have right now is simple, relatable, visual, and meaningful. I think we sort of keep adding to this list of adjectives as we sort of continue with this conversation. Cool. So I think what we've established is that data was there, limited data was there, was not very accessible. But through your social media page, you kind of made it accessible. And then, of course, keeping the messaging simple and relatable and so on. I think one other question, which I'm also seeing a lot of our attendees asking, is that, of course, social media is one way of communicating, but I'm sure that you've also experimented over the last decade or so with different kinds of, tools to communicate the equality data / information. Which one, in your view, has been sort of, most effective in reaching out to the people?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that communicating data is a tool that you have to know how to do it. You have to, you have to have the data. But for me, what makes the campaign really effective is the change. And therefore, for us, it was very important that apart from communicating the data and that we have the problem, we also communicate the solution. And I think this is in terms of like campaigning, this is key. You can't stop at showing the data, however you do it. And you can't stop at showing the problem. You really have to propose the solution. At least in Poland, you can't expect that the authorities will come up with a solution. I think if you want to have the solution implemented, you really have to propose it and you have to offer hope, because otherwise people will get discouraged. And people also, they desensitivize, I don't know if that's the word, but they become less and less sensitive to the alarming messages. So this is why you need to show there is a solution at hand. Let's fight for the solution, not only worry that we are dying because of air pollution. Most effective, I think, I think it's more, the more visual, the more effective it is. Like the lung campaign, it was really, really impactful and has been and still is for many people. We also have PM sensors on the lung, but no one pays attention to the numbers. Everyone pays attention to the color of the fabric. And and the example that I mentioned of this benzoypyran calculator to cigarettes, like it was, it was quoted by all the media really that we've worked with. But we also put a lot of effort into working with the ordinary traditional media, and not only social media, because a large part of our target group is not very active in the social media. So we're trying to reach them through ordinary media as well. Yeah.
No, excellent. I think for some of you who have asked this question, the message is loud and clear, right? Visual campaigns kind of work better because people really engage with images rather than with numbers, and sort of also using the media strategically to get the message out there, because a lot of people probably follow the media more than they do the social media. So strategically using media is another very important communication tool. So great. Now this kind of brings me to sort of a very important part of this whole conversation, right? Like, great, you have these different communication channels out there. You're using these channels to get the information out. But how do you really know that people are engaging with the data? Right? I think that becomes most important because, I mean, like you said, even with Air Quality Life Index, we know that the report goes out every year and it gets a lot of media attention. And right around that time, there is a lot of interest in, what is happening with air quality. But how do you really know that this is an issue that people are really concerned about and how they're going to engage with it consistently? Do you see that change in Krakow? And why do you think that changes happen? And when did you start seeing that change?
Yeah. Well, in case of Krakow, we definitely saw people so engaged with the data. First of all, we created a fan page that grew like exponentially, really very, very quickly. Then we engaged people like in protest marches, different happenings, events. 20,000 people signed the petition. So we were kind of thinking about activities that would actually make people do something. And we would have different types of activities. This could be just sign something. So that's like 2 minutes of your time. But maybe you would like to come to a protest march. That's 2 hours of your time. Or maybe you would like to come to a meeting and do something more with us, engage in preparing the next event or something like this. So that would take like a couple of days of your time if you have it available. So that was, we could see this massive support. And this is why it took only 1 year to demand, to actually have the coal ban voted. You have to understand that Poland was at that time, it was actually not called Poland, but coal land, because we have a lot of coal mines. So this is why we have a lot of coal. So we are really deeply, deeply like attached to to coal as a country still, but less and less so. So yeah, I think you need to think about different ways of engaging people, but also, of course, you can see through the activities in the social media what people write under your posts. Now it's more difficult because we know that there are lots of bots that do the media traffic, but at that time it wasn't the case. But you can also see it in traditional media, usually under articles. At least in some of the media you can comment, so you can read through the comments and see what people say about the thing that you are advocating for. So yeah, there are a lot of ways of checking that.
Again, I think sort of very clear takeaway is that you need to give people something to do. Otherwise, they are going to lose interest. It's just going to be sort of, another information for them. But the moment they have something to do, they would potentially engage more with what you're providing as information. Super. There's this one very interesting question that we've received from one of the attendees, which is around, so one, also, I mean, again, sort of going to the point of, data communication or information communication, there are two stakeholder groups, if I may say. One is, of course, the citizens who need to understand that there is a problem, but there is also policymakers, right? Like authorities, the other stakeholders.
Yeah.
So I think two questions here that how did you identify who your key stakeholder within the policy circle was as far as what you were demanding through your campaign is concerned? And how did you communicate that to the policymakers? Were there some strategies that you thought were effective in communicating with the authorities?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So in Krakow, we knew what we wanted to do. We knew that we wanted to fight for the coal and wood ban, because that wasn't our idea, but we read through the document which is called our quality plan. And in that document, it said that, and the document is prepared by regional authorities, which are responsible for air quality. So that document said that in order to improve air quality in Krakow, you have to ban the use of solid fuels, so coal and wood. But the next sentence said that it's impossible due to social and economic reasons. So with our campaign, we wanted to kind of erase the second sentence and make it possible. So why was it impossible? And we were thinking, okay, because people will not have money to install new heating systems. So we knew that we have to make sure that there are subsidies for new heating systems, so that people, of course, don't get cold in winter, and so on and so forth. So we knew that we have to target definitely regional authorities, because like officially they were responsible for taking this decision, the vote. And we had to target city authorities, because without their consent and their interest, regional authorities would not do anything. So we knew who our target was. And then we were pretty lucky, because Krakow's authorities were very open and they really wanted to do it. So the mayor was from the beginning in favor of that solution. We had to work a bit on the city council. But that was done through showing that so many inhabitants of Krakow, like, as I said, 20,000 signed the petition, see the problem and want the politicians to tackle the problem effectively. And like literally, we had regional politicians, like one of the heads of the regional parliament, saying at the beginning of our campaign, when he heard that we are advocating for the coal ban, he said that it's impossible because people will freeze in winter. And after half a year of the campaign and looking together for the solutions so that this does not happen, he would be like he would promote actually the ban, and he would be the main supporter of the ban. So that was also interesting to see how their reactions changed. But they changed because they could see the power of the people. We would not be able to do that without the immense support from thousands of people living in Krakow, from the scientific circle, from the doctors, from artists, from businesses in Krakow who are also concerned that they will lose, I don't know, tourists, for example. So, and also like really huge media pressure. As I said, like Krakow was the capital of smog and was portrayed as a capital of smog. So this put additional pressure of doing something because one of the main economies of Krakow is, of course, tourism.
Right. No, I think, again, two things are becoming very clear, right? One is you have to demonstrate the power of people, that there is a common message which is unifying people. And second, sort of that messaging around solutions, that sort of implementing a solution does work, presenting that evidence convincingly to policymakers for them to think that, this requires large-scale policy implementation. Super. I think sort of going back to this question of power of people, I think we have a very interesting question. This is coming from the Pakistan Air Quality Initiative, which is around now. Of course, there are multiple smaller initiatives which have become a part of Polish Smog Alert. So I think the question is that how do you bring these initiatives together? Like what kind of strategies are needed to sort of get everyone together? Because often what happens is that everyone wants clean air, but they've sort of different sort of theories of change, so to say, for bringing about the change. So what kind of approaches did Polish Smog Alert follow, and you followed in particular, to get so many groups together and advocate for something that really changed the scene in Krakow?
So yeah, we well, it started with 3 initiatives and then developed, but it works like that. We are the secretariat here from Krakow, and we kind of are responsible for working on the national level reforms. Of course, we consult and we are in dialogue with our local groups, but at the end we make the decision, because there needs to be someone responsible, and there needs to be someone who is the face of it. So, and it needs to be coordinated. But local groups, they focus on their regions and their cities or villages or towns, and so we help them to do their local work. We provide them with training, we provide them with grants. We organize meetings to network and exchange experiences. We involve them in different campaigns and so on and so forth. But they provide us with the power basically because of the fact that there are so many of them, right? So they kind of legitimize our work on the national level, but they also provide us with very important insights from the ground, from where the instruments that we advocate for are implemented. This is also very important to have this reality check, whether something is working or not, and what is missing, and so on and so forth. So this works really both ways. And also we have like certain ground rules that cannot be broken. So for example, one of the ground rules is that neither Polish Smog Alert nor local initiatives can earn money or take financial support from companies that benefit from our work, right? So, for example, I don't know, insulation producers, heat pump producers, air purifier producers, things like that. We're not supported financially by this kind of companies because we are not lobbyists of companies, right? We are advocates of clean air. Another absolutely unbreakable rule is that we are apolitical, which means that we work with every party who is interested in improving air, regardless of our personal political views. And also the members of Polish Smog Alert cannot be politicians. So that's another one. So yeah, we're trying somehow to organize it.
No, I think it's interesting sort of having that ground rules, one, to just filter out people who you think are not going to be actively contributing to the campaign. The other important piece is also having that structure, right? That everyone sort of agrees to, wherein everybody has a very specific role to play in the campaign.
Yes.
Some groups are primarily contributing to local insights, some are sort of contributing to coordination. So I think having that structure kind of worked out in your case. I have two questions, which I think one is a little bit on the side of dealing with inaction. And it's also related to one of the questions that we've received from our attendees. And the other question is about, your future plans. They're both related, so I'll try and club them together. So, of course, in Krakow, like you said, the authorities were very open, and there was this dialogue between you and them, and subsequently policies were implemented, and you've seen change. But I'm sure that there were times when action was slow or maybe not up to your expectations, and we see that happening in many parts of the world where citizen groups are active, they're trying to create a dialogue with authorities, but progress is slow. So my question is that how do you sort of deal with those situations where inaction is happening? Because it's easy for pessimism to sort of seep in at those times. So how do you sort of structure your approach? That's one. And the second piece, which I think is a little tricky, is that in Krakow in particular, there was this one major source, right? That household coal combustion, which you've managed to clamp down on. But moving forward, it might be a little tricky to reduce pollution levels from here on, right? Because that significant source has been addressed. So what do you plan to do to further improve air quality in Krakow? So I don't know. I think somewhat related, maybe not exactly related, but over to you to share your thoughts.
Yeah, they are related, definitely. And I'll start with the second one. Actually, we are here now in a sort of predicament because the air quality has improved so much that there is inaction. But in our opinion, air quality is still not good enough. And of course, it's not meeting, that does not meet the new EU air quality standards, definitely not meeting the WHO recommendations. So, but people do not perceive air quality, lower quality right now as life-threatening as they used to. So they are less involved. And for example, right now we are advocating for the introduction of the low emission zone in Krakow to limit the circulation of the most polluting vehicles. And we can see that people are much less involved in that topic, whereas the opponents are very, very involved because, of course, it concerns their cars. So it is a tricky question, and it's also it's a problem, and it's very difficult to address. It is a problem, and well, coming back to your first question, is that I think the simple answer is don't give up. I know it sounds very simple, but that's it, because we have throughout, this over 10 years of our activities, we have experienced different governments, right wing, left wing, central, no, left wing, no, right wing and central. And they responded differently. And sometimes something happens that makes them more responsive. So for example, I don't know, we are in the EU, so the European Commission sometimes helps us, meaning that, for example, Poland was found guilty of not fulfilling the EU Clean Air Directive, right? So this really helped in pushing the reforms that I was talking about. Or a very unfortunate incident, because in Poland, the capital is in the center of the country, right? Warsaw. And most of the smog happens in southern regions of Poland. So the capital doesn't really care about it. But this changed because in January 2017, there was a huge smog episode which lasted almost 2 months, and it attacked actually the capital. So this is what, changed the perspective of the politicians sitting in the parliament. So sometimes you can use different narratives. You don't need to talk about air pollution. You can talk about energy security. You can talk about affordable heating, houses that are comfortable to live in, and so on and so forth. So, but I think what is always helpful is to find your core supporters, people that are kind of sensitive to what you're saying. So in case of air pollution, I think these are parents of young children. And an interesting thing that we did, and it was a low-cost awareness-raising campaign at the beginning, even before setting up the Facebook page more than 10 years ago, in Krakow, was that we kind of cooperated with the city council so that they made these recommendations to kindergartens that small children do not go out for walks when the air quality is bad. And if you are a parent of a young child, you are always interested when you pick up the child from the kindergarten whether the child had a walk and could run on fresh air or not. And when the parents, found out that again the child didn't go out, they started asking why, and this is how they got to know that there is air pollution. And this was one of the core group of supporters for us. Yeah.
And I had the opportunity to meet with Andre, who is another of your colleagues one of your colleagues at Polish Smog Alert, and he also narrated this story to me in person. And I think it's a very interesting way to get sort of parents of young children induced into the conversation. So indeed, that's also probably been an effective strategy in your case. I'll ask one last question, and then unfortunately, despite the barrage of questions that we've received in this webinar, I will have to stop it at some point. But one last question, interesting question again, and this goes back to the nature of transition that has happened in Krakow. I'm sure that there was a critical role that the government played, but also a critical role that the private sector played to sort of provide equipment and so on. So how did that synergy happen between what the government mandated and how the private sector responded?
Mm-hmm. Well, in terms of private sector, of course, we had like the different private sectors, different companies, because in terms of, investments in houses, there were companies like installation companies that would cooperate with the city to provide like simplified approach to subsidies and very like quick process of heat source replacement and so on. And that was really like something that the city was involved to organize this in the least like hassle, so to make it hassle-free basically for the inhabitants. But I think what was really important was the development of the low-cost sensors, for example, the early network, but there were also other networks. And this was also important once the coal ban came into force. We still had smog days. And it would be very difficult for people to explain it to people. How come? I mean, we don't burn coal anymore, we don't burn wood, so maybe this legislation is not working. But we could see clearly, because of the very dense network provided by EARLY, that this pollution was actually first happening around Krakow in the evening and then slowly progressing towards the center of the city. So that was also very important in terms of engagement of different private sector partners and in terms of data. That was really, really important.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Anna. I think I have sort of pages worth of notes from this conversation, and I'm sure that others who have joined in are also going to sort of leave the webinar with very clear takeaways on how to actually use data to strengthen your campaign and actually ensure that the data is translating into real change. So thank you so much. But I'd like to hand it over to Christa first to do like a quick summary of what she took away from the conversation before we wrap up this webinar.
Yeah, thank you so much, Anna and Tanushree, for the fascinating conversation. What we've just heard is a powerful example of the potential that exists when local efforts coalesce strategically, and when data is communicated in ways that connect with the community, and how that can drive real change and ultimately the goal, longer lives. And while actually we were having this conversation, I got a message from Jim McQuaid, who is watching. He's one of the makers of the air quality stripes, and he shared Krakow's stripes, which I'll put into the chat right there. Incidentally, it's a great way to use data to visualize Krakow's air pollution story over several decades, actually. So I've known about Poland's clean air progress, and in particular Krakow's, for a while, but until hearing your story, Anna, I hadn't appreciated several aspects of it. One, I hadn't appreciated the scale of it, that if I'm doing my math right, it's helped more than added more than a year of life expectancy back onto folks' lives. And that's incredible. I didn't know the granular story behind Polish Smog Alert's work, the role of citizen marches combined with voices of experts like medical doctors. And as you were describing, taking the data and using it in ways to connect with folks. I think you used the term, cleverly using the data to communicate information. And I also did not appreciate the way that your program grew nationally from, in an organic way, it sounded like, from, an initial Krakow effort, and then found a way to coalesce all the other local groups. And I think that's a super important lesson for the community, because I think, as Tanushree was pointing out, that's often a crux. There's a lot of interest, but then how do you sort of channel it into something that's more than the sum of its parts and can lobby at the national level? But lastly, my favorite part was seeing that reduction in poor air quality days in Krakow since 2019. That was beautiful. This is exactly the kind of story we're hoping to share through this series, the data to demand to action, and really exploring these messy, human, but ultimately inspiring stories of how change actually happens. This brings me, actually, as we're closing out, to an ask of the audience. We are looking for your help to find air quality champions, just like Anna and Polish Smog Alert, who are doing this type of work, and help us to share with the rest of the world about it through this webinar series. So we're crowdsourcing names of individuals and organizations that have successfully raised awareness or catalyzed action on air pollution, especially using data. We'd love your suggestions. The form, I believe, is now in the chat box for folks to do that. And with that, I want to thank you all for joining this first session. And we hope you'll stay with us as we continue to feature communities from around the world who are using data to clean up the air we breathe. And see you next time.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you, Anna.